Hello there, welcome to Needles Whatever. In this video, I'm going to experiment with hanging stitches. Hanging stitches is required when you want to create a ribbing after the garment is done. Okay, so my knitting is done but still requires the ribbed part. Since I use the LK150, which doesn't have a ribber, ribbing is a bit time consuming. So I'd rather do it after I'm sure that the garment is exactly to my liking. I do a lot of experiments while I'm knitting, and most of the time I have to unravel whatever I did and redo with some alterations. So for example, in this case, as you can see, this sleeve here, this had quite a complex cable pattern required, and I wasn't sure that it would be perfect. So I didn't do the ribbing, but I did it afterwards. I cast on over here, finished all the sleeve, and then hung my sleeve back on the machine and created the ribbed edge. Now, when it comes to hanging onto the machine, I'm often perplexed at which part of the loop I should hang. Okay, so this is one of the finished samples. I did 3 samples here to have something on which to work. Now, as you can see here, I have the loops. This is my cast on seam. Okay, this is the finished seam. This is my cast on seam. This is the back loop. We're referring to the loop which is close to the right part of the stockinette. This is the front loop, the loop which is on the purl side of my stockinette, or both. I could actually take up both loops and hang that. Now, what would be the results? So I thought the best way to do that would be to experiment. So I did 3 samples, and now I'm going to have 1 sample ribbed using just the back loop, 1 sample used ribbed with just the front loop, and 1 sample which involves picking up both. Now let's start with the dark pink one. I'm going to put the knit side not facing me, purl side facing me. Now for this one, I'm going to take just the back loop. Okay, now I prefer to do it this way, so I start off like this, and I'm just hanging on the back loop. Have just been hanged. Using the back loops, I'm going to add weight. Okay, and let's get this rolling. All levers are pushed triangle and 2. Now with the blue one, I'm going to use the front loop only. I'm going to hang this front loop, which is the one on the side of my purl side of the knitting, and I'm hanging just that loop. Let's see how this will look. Okay, so my last sample here, the third one, I'm going to use both loops this time. I'm hanging the front and the back loop, both all together on the same needle. Let's see how this turns out. Hello, so we're back on my fake marble top. with the samples, this time with their little ribbing added to the stockinette sample. This one here was the first sample, and for this one we used the loop that was on the net side, so it was the back loop of when placed on the machine. And as you can see, it's quite neat. You can't really see any difference between one stitch and the other, so it looks good. On the back you can see here it's good too. So that was the first sample. In the second sample we used the loop that was on the pearl side. This is the result. As you can see, there's this little pattern here which is quite obvious. I'm going to zoom in so you can see it. It looks like a detail. It would look good maybe on a neckline where you want a detail between the stockinette and the ribbing. But if you don't want it to seem like two different parts, I wouldn't recommend it. This was using the loop that is on the pearl side. And then we have, this was the easiest to do. Then we have the sample using the stitch in between, so both loops, hanging both loops. On the back, as you can see both loops here. Okay, this was the easiest to do. So if I had to decide on a way forward, I would be between this and this, but I think this looks better and it's also easier to create. So I think that, in my opinion, the best way to add ribbing afterwards is by hanging both loops, all of the stitch, onto your needle.